it's like a bruise. It's the difference between a bruise and a cut. If I cut myself, I know straight away, oh, geez, I did this, my cat got me. Whereas if I bruise myself, it's the next day and I'm like, oh, geez, how did that happen? I can't place the cause that led to that effect.
Welcome, Simon. I really liked seeing it on the videos on your website that you have this presentation, I think you did, that's entitled Technology is Necessary, but Not Sufficient. Why are you going with that?
Oh, wow, John, you've seen my videos. That's very kind of you. Well, I have to first say that a lot of that, if not most of it, is based on Ellie Goldratt's Technology is Necessary but Not Sufficient business novel, which I absolutely loved. And there's a lot of other kind of credits. All the good ideas are not mine. All the bad ideas are mine. I have to first give that credit first. So what I really liked about his book and his general approach, which I guess he included in his body of knowledge, The Theory of Constraints, was that technology is necessary but not sufficient to drive bottom line benefits, i.e. putting the right technology in the wrong place won't have any impact other than increasing costs. And so a lot of what I talk about in that presentation is how do you work out whether you need technology somewhere, where is the right place, and if it's not technology that you need, what do you need? And if you watch that through a little bit more, you probably saw a lot of the time it's not technology that's the constraint in an organization. It's something else. What came up for you?
So, yeah, you're right, that's very true. And I guess as software engineers, a lot of us leap straight into technology has to be the answer. It's a bit of that shiny hammer syndrome, isn't it? That, hey, we have a hammer, in this case, software and building software, so that must be the answer. Or we have some technologies, that must be the answer. Interesting. I looked at part of that video. I have to admit, I spent a little bit more time getting distracted by the parenting and management one, as I can relate to both, having managed teams of software engineers and, I don't know, do we call it a team of children?
I guess so. An army.
It feels like an army when I have to pay to take them on holiday. It gets expensive when there's a bunch of them. So back to technology being necessary but not sufficient. That makes me think of AI as well at the moment. It feels like a lot of the times we're trying to shoehorn AI in there with, we've got this technology, let's use it everywhere. How are you finding that with AI? What's your opinion been on?
Oh, I appreciate that. I mean, first of all, sorry, to your earlier point, I'm also a software engineer, so I love solutions. I absolutely love solutions. So I share that kind of shiny object syndrome, I guess, I think, as you worded it. And that's a really nice way of putting it. With AI, I have to say, I'm very naive. It seems to me that, from what little I know, and I'd love to be corrected, it is a solution for specific problems. But the amount of buzz that's been created for it means that the set of problems for which we think it might be a solution has kind of been enlarged, and that maybe means that it's not following through on the promises, and that's quite I can imagine frustrating for organizations. But what's your take, John? Because I think you're probably more in on AI than me.
Yeah, I have a bit of a love-hate with it at the moment. AI is why I got into software engineering 40 years ago. As a kid, I read like Asimov books and things about robots and AI, Arthur C. Clarke and all that, and I was fascinated. That's why I got into software engineering, and I tried to build AI as a 9-year-old kid. On a ZX Spectrum or BBC Micro, that wasn't going to get very far, but it was what sparked that passion and that interest. So that passion and interest is carried on, but at the same time, I'm older, grayer. I'd like to say wiser, but that we can debate that. So I've got a healthy skepticism of all the marketing, and I seem to come across as a grumpy old git shouting, "Get off my lawn" about AI, I think, more than I come across as an advocate, which is kind of frustrating, as I say, it's been a long-term passion. But it absolutely feels that we are trying to shoehorn this very impressive thing that was LLMs into doing far, far more than they actually do. And it reminds me of Eliza, just, on steroids, if you will, because Eliza fooled people into believing that it was a human with some very, very basic tricks. And you can implement Eliza in about 400 lines of code. But with those very clever linguistic tricks, it looks like a human to a lot of people. All these modern chat interfaces and LLMs are that, like I say, on steroids. They're massively more complex, massively more powerful, massively more training data. And that makes them appear to have amazing recollection. It makes that recollection combined with that looking human and the language makes them appear far more human than they are, makes them look like they're reasoning. Because if you ask someone a question, or you ask something a question, and you get back what appears to be a correct, well-structured answer, delivered confidently,
Yes.
we tend to believe it, and we tend to think that that's intelligence, and we tend to think that that person or that thing giving us that answer understands. Where realistically, LLMs don't understand. They are producing the next sequence of tokens based on a probability. With sheer volume of data, that probability is quite often right, if it's had the right input to generate it. But it's not guaranteed, it's still probabilistic. So I think they're incredibly useful for a lot of things. So if you feed in some text and say, reword this, or generate some follow-on to this ideas, or turn these sentences or bullet points into paragraphs of text, incredibly powerful that. If you apply the same for code, which in a way, sentences and functions of sentences, you could equate to lines of code, and paragraphs to functions, perhaps, it can generate a lot of code, but it doesn't have that understanding. And we seem to have gone beyond this. Like, it can generate something useful, or it can repeat stuff that it's memorized. Like, I don't know, it's seen the diff function thousands of times in the training data because people have blogged about it. It's on Stack Overflow, blah, blah, blah. So it appears amazing, but it's the ability to recollect something from a training set is not expertise, it's not reasoning, it's not intelligence. It's almost like Google search, but that next level of powerful with that chat interface. But I think that's incredibly useful. You can benefit from that coding. I've built a website with it where it works spectacularly, and I built a website with Astro, which I never touched before. I didn't have to write any code for that. It's a very simple front-end website, but it did great. I tried it on another simple front-end website. It completely missed the mark, made a terrible mess of it. Again, it can be a very powerful tool, but it's not this miraculous thing that's going to replace software engineers, as many people would hype it.
No, you put it so well, John. I think, there's a few things in what you said, if I can remember. One is, as you had to say, it doesn't reason, it doesn't use logic, and that's quite, and that means for a number of applications it wouldn't necessarily be suitable. But if you say, if we need something that's approximate, like, going to eBay to get a secondhand item versus kind of something new from Amazon, it just meets our needs, but doesn't meet all our desires, then maybe that's fine. But as soon as you work in a large organization with other collaborators and you're all kind of making pull requests and you're trying to improve the quality of the code to allow you to go faster in the future, I assume that might make it harder, perhaps, because more code is more liability is basically tech debt. So, but I guess the other thing you said, right, is there's a difference between, there's another set of problems maybe that artificial intelligence makes it sound like there's artificial intelligence and I guess artificial wisdom, right? And artificial intelligence can help you improve the efficiency of things perhaps, but it'll never help you work out how to be more effective, how to kind of what your goal should be, because choosing a goal, as Akoff says, is kind of a value-based judgment. What am I trying to do in this organization? Why were we founded, right? So there'll always be a class of problems that perhaps, from my understanding of Akoff, that artificial intelligence can't solve. But if you feed it all the data and it were able to be fully logical, it could help you work out how to be the most efficient, perhaps. That's another type of problem. But you put it really well. The lack of logical reasoning is something to be really aware of, I think, because that's quite important, I assume, in making code that you can all collaborate on together.
Yeah, and the LLMs, code is just a language. They can provide benefits for, say, marketing people or producing documentation and so on. So they have a lot of uses, and I've certainly found them quite useful for being able to say, I want to express these ideas, dump a bunch of ideas and get some feedback from that. So I have used them for a bit of writing when I want to say, how do I document this? Here's all my notes, here's my rough stuff, turn it into a first draft. I don't normally like what comes out because it tends to be too fluffy and too verbose, but as an aid to thinking, it's like, throw this together, give me something, give me some structure, get me through that first couple of drafts that are always painful to do. It's really useful as a shortcut. And again, I see for code, it can be useful for that. Now, it's not going to solve everything, but there's some areas we can leverage. Come back to that idea of what is the bottleneck in software engineering? And I don't think it has ever been writing the code. Writing the code generally is typing at the end of a whole series of other activities that involve talking to people, figuring out what we want to build. What are we trying to build? What's the problem we're trying to solve?
Yeah.
And then thinking about the solution. And the final bit of coding is just that generation of the artifact at the end of it, and that never to me has been the bottleneck.
Yeah, no, that feels true. And I definitely want to support that AI is a solution to certain problems, but kind of putting the boundaries around where that problem is and doing so in an accurate way seems a very important step to using AI effectively. But yeah, what you say, yeah, I don't disagree. Feel, organizations exist because you're trying to achieve something greater than yourself. You can't do it alone. And therefore, organizations necessitate cooperation. And it's normally that cooperation element that's the hard piece. And that's why you have managers typically, ideally, because you want to help them increase the impact of every individual team or engineer. They're there to amplify the impact. And that's the hard bit. I don't know about you, but when I became a manager, I didn't realize it's a complete shift in theory. It's not just becoming an engineer that with engineering background and just does something different one day. It's a whole different set of theory. It's a whole different approach, and I got it really wrong. And so that cooperation piece for organizations to achieve something great themselves, you need cooperation and you need a clear goal. There's a lot of things that you just aren't taught in engineering that become necessary when you enter manager or parents' shoes. It all comes up for you, John.
Yeah. On that note, one of the things I've highlighted several times on previous episodes of the podcast is software engineering is a team sport. It's not just about building the software. We need those soft skills where to collaborate and communicate effectively. We need to talk to customers. We need to talk to users. We need to talk to other teams. We need to talk to other people in the team and collaborate and exchange that information. We often forget the importance of soft skills in software engineering. And what you just said about managers there, again, as far as I'm concerned, management is a very different career to being a software engineer. When you become a manager, you are going back to square one and starting a whole new career. Yes, you're still working in the technology domain, perhaps, but it's a very different career because, as you say, you're now dealing with people. You're dealing with how do we create that collaboration? How do we lift these people up? How do we get the best out of them? How do we provide them with what they need to deliver their best? How do we improve that communication? How do we shape the organization? How do we debug the organization?
Mm-hmm.
All those challenges. Instead of the bottleneck in the code of like, how do we get this data through the processor? We're looking at now, how do we get the data? Or whatever other resource we're managing through the organization, whether that's cash flowing through the organization or data flowing from our customers through the organization, or whatever it may be. A whole different set of bottlenecks to think about.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And I think the hardest thing is, as you know better than me, being a parent, a more tenured parent than me, is when you become a manager, when you become a parent, the approach to problem solving needs to change. Because it's not about, you can't feel or you can't predict what your children or what your staff need. If you did, you wouldn't have so many disgruntled staff leaving organizations because their manager, projects running late, etc. And you also can't control your kids. You can't control your staff. What that means is you need to be able to understand what your kids or your staff need before they get there. And you need to be able to create the conditions for them to succeed. You can't do anything directly anymore. And that's completely different. What has helped you succeed as an individual in the past won't help you help others succeed in the future. And it's that level of indirectness, that's where you start to enter systems thinking, which is looking beyond the first order. It's looking beyond, if I do this, this will happen, and looking at the finer repercussions across the organization. And we've all seen this. This is where tech debt comes from. As my mentor and friend Noah Cantor says, tech debt is a symptom, a local symptom in technology of an organizational problem. It's something that's caused by the organization trying to go faster than they can. Maybe if you're a product organization, it's sales, selling more features faster and faster to get more and more customers. That leads to engineers creating greater and greater complexity, more tech debt, slowing down, but sales is still selling. And therefore, the organization comes crashing down because they just can't manage this monolith anymore, and they need to be able to generate more sales. So parenting management is completely different because you're looking beyond the first order. And you do that in engineering, you do that in a lot of things. The only time I've seen it done successfully really is like a general practitioner, where you recognize the symptom is separate from the cause. And often any one cause has many symptoms. You recognize that, as Akov says, Russell Akov, he says, if you have a headache, you don't need brain surgery. The reason you have a headache is because there's something else in your body that's not happy. You need to go and find out what it is. You don't treat the symptom locally to the cause.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think The first thing I'm going to pick up on there is talking about the parenting and management analogy.
Mm.
The other thing is, when we're a software engineer, when we're an individual contributor and dealing with things, whatever programming language you're using, let's say it's C, we create a set of instructions and they are deterministic. And we can take that C code and I can stick it on an Apple, I can stick it on a Windows PC, I can stick it on a Linux box. They could have ARM86 or x86, and excluding any small possibility of a bug in the compiler, that code will do the same thing on every single one. It's deterministic. And it'll do the same thing on Monday, on Tuesday, on Saturday, Sunday, whatever day of the week, whatever day of the year, whatever year. People, not so much.
Yeah.
Every single person is going to be different. I can come into you and say, hey, good morning, Simon. And you could take that brilliant on Monday. On Tuesday, you're in a foul mood, something's gone wrong, you've had a really bad day, and it could just be too much cheerfulness and it just winds you up. And then on Wednesday, it could be, hey, great, how you doing, Simon? And you're even more cheerful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just sorry to pick on you as an example there, but every single day, the same person could behave completely differently depending on everything else that's going on in their life. Multiply that across a team where you've got a whole bunch of different individuals, all at different stages of their lives. And, let's pick on the children thing again. Maybe they're up all night with a young baby. Maybe they've got a teenager who's giving them issues with typical teenager, all sorts of different things. We don't know what's going on in people's lives. Once we've got that team, it gets very, very messy. So I think we're really back to the point you made earlier that nobody teaches to be a manager, that suddenly you're dealing with a whole bunch of different issues. And as you say, you can't just apply this well-known fix to that situation because each one is different.
No, I don't disagree. A field I've not read into yet, someone's nudged me towards, Lisa Scheinkoff, and I need to read about it, called Situational Leadership, which is about, as I understand, kind of understanding individuals and kind of managing them in the way they want to be managed. But there's another part to it. I think Eli Goldratt puts it really well. I can't remember his exact wording, but he said something like, he's a physicist and he went into, for lack of a better term, management consulting. And he talks about how you can't predict the path of every individual electron. But you can generally say that, law of large numbers, that most electrons will follow roughly a given path. Same with staff and organizations, that if you look at an organization initially seems so complex, all these different people working in different ways with different needs, different wants, it sounds really scary. But like natural phenomenon, like, understanding why do planets circle each other, why do apples fall from trees? All of these tend to have just a few underlying common causes. In this case, gravity. That's the only one I can think of. But if you understand the cause behind many things, typically, and keep asking why, you'll tend to find common underlying causes. And that's great for two reasons. One is if there's a lot of any one underlying cause, like when you go to the doctor, one underlying ailment will often have many different symptoms in an organization, many different problems, it will cause many different obstacles across many different teams. And that's great because you can treat one underlying cause and get widespread relief across the organization. If you can understand why is delivery slowing, why are staff generally leaving, not specifically, because as you said, everyone's different, but generally why a lot of staff, why do we have higher attrition than that market average? And you trace all these things back, increasing TED debt, etc. You can generally find at any one point there'll probably just be one or two or three, very few underlying causes compared to the number of symptoms. And that gives you that leverage, that buy one, get three free. Whereas if you tackle all the symptoms in isolation locally, all you're doing is buying pain relief, and that's generally just a waste of money. So that's one thing that's very helpful. But that's, I guess, not negating the need to understand your staff and work out how they would like to be managed in the local. I'll be saying this a lot. What comes up for you, John?
So, as you were talking there, what I was thinking about is the idea of water flowing through a stream or a riverbed or down the side of a hill. And I think we forget sometimes that people are very much the same. We are going to take through that organizational structure. In general, we're going to take the path of least resistance. So again, viewing it from a different point of view, rather than necessarily as symptoms, but if we want to change that organization, we want to change the culture in an organization, we just need to create a new path of least resistance. We don't need to change everything. We don't need to go and change everyone individually. We just need to make this the golden path or the path of least resistance and make it easy to do the right thing, however we've now defined that right thing.
Ooh, I like
And I
that.
think we forget that too much in trying to put these different constraints on and say, tell people what to do rather than actually just making it easy to do the desired behavior or the desired process.
I don't disagree. I feel that often, like with technical debt, to improve things, it's often about eliminating. It's about reducing rules, increasing simplicity as opposed to kind of adding complexity. So I don't disagree with that. One thing you said there, which was interesting, like about the path to least resistance. There are two things there. One was Ellie Goldratt. So I keep referring to him because I really quite find his work so clarifying in my mind. But he suggests, tell me how you'll measure me and I'll tell you how I'll behave. So a lot of the measures that we introduced, a lot of his fight during his career, if I understood correctly, was about reducing local measures that distorted behavior and took the organization further away from the goal. So I think we've all read, or at least I haven't read it, but I read a bit of Mythical Man Month. I think it was around that. I think it was either in that book or around that book. They talked about how can we measure developer productivity? Should we do it based on the number of lines written? Should we do it based on this and that? And should we measure based on how quickly they deliver a project? Those kind of things. And if we do that, it's really initially hard if you look at the short term to see the distortion that introduces. We've seen it probably it's more clear in consultancies, right, where sales sell and then delivery teams deliver, and the sales are incentivized to sell no matter what. And if their jobs depend on selling through no fault of their own, as Deming suggests, then they'll do anything they can to meet their sales quota because they want to keep their job. What does that mean? They sell anything they can to their clients to make sure they meet that quota, even if it's the wrong thing, because they want to keep their jobs. But does that help the organization? No, it kills relationships. And it means whilst it helps short-term profitability, the long-term profitability is problematic. So I think a lot of Goldratt's focus was trying to remove local measures that distorted global performance of the organization. So to your point, I think to try and repeat your point using different words, because I felt it was very profound, was a lot of the reason that the organization is where it is because they introduce a lot of minutia or small measures that distort behavior and take us further away from our goal. The constraint that stops an organization from being where it most wants to be lies in the mind of its managers. It's generally an assumption in the brain of leadership that leads to the rules that are implemented locally that distort behavior and encourage people to take us further away from where we most want to be. It feels like beliefs lead to behaviors, lead to process, lead to technology.
Yeah.
Beliefs from management lead to them implementing rules or behaviors in management lead to processes being implemented that are then cemented in technology. And once something's cemented in technology, it's very hard to take back. But that was a long-winded one. I went in a lot of different directions. What are you thinking, John?
I'm thinking that I have the perfect example for that.
A
friend of mine a couple of years ago was working for a company, and he got very frustrated that they got a new manager in, and he felt that he had to show that his team was productive. In discussions with whatever senior management he had, they decided that the metric there was number of Jira tickets closed.
Yeah.
And as I've said, software engineering is a team sport. This friend of mine firmly believes that too. When you incentivize individual developers and reward or penalize them based on tickets closed, they are now incentivized to ensure everyone else closes less tickets, close as many tickets as they can themselves. So that took immediately a team that was collaborative and working together to now, well, how do I stop other people working better than me? Well, I raise lots of issues in code reviews. Or I simply don't do the code review until the last minute, until I have to. So, code review is already a bottleneck in many organizations. That just made that worse. It also meant that developers were trying to always pick the easy tickets, the tickets that would suit them, and avoid the hard tickets. They were also then, if you got stuck on a ticket, where before people would have collaborated and paired or mobbed on something, there was now no incentive to do that because your name wasn't on the ticket. Why would you work on somebody else's ticket and help them? So in a matter of weeks, he said this team went from a good collaborative team that were working well to a bunch of individuals that were deliberately trying to sabotage each other because they were now in competition.
That's a beautiful example, John. A really sad example, but a very beautiful one, John. Deming says something like, I can always get the percentages wrong, but he says 95% of time problems we see in organizations is due to the system and not the people. Whereas a lot of the time we look at the people first. I guess that's fundamental attribution error. We look at people and we blame people. And I can't remember his name. I think it's Marco Con. I can't remember his name, but he gave me this wonderful phrase, which is we should be hard on systems and soft on people. Often when we kind of do post-mortems or things like that, we ask why just to get to the point of the person and go, well, that's the problem. But we need to keep asking why. So, well, why did they do that? How did we create the conditions for them to make that mistake? What did we rob them of? And I think Noah mentioned that in Toyota, he couldn't remember this fully, but there's something like when something doesn't go as expected, they ask something like 40 questions about this, the individual and the situation. And the first 39 questions are about how did we fail this employee? And the 40th question is something like, did we put this employee in the wrong job? So it's still about the system. It's about the hiring, but it's still about the system. They recognize that most of the time when things go wrong, it's because we haven't created the conditions for teams to succeed. They don't just go straight to the individual and say it's that.
I do believe it was Deming that said that 95% of our success comes from our systems, not the people. And we're knowledge workers, so we're generally, I hope, more intelligent than, say, average. It's our role as jobs, and our jobs to be, working on the more intelligent end of things, to be applying our knowledge, applying our brains. So it's quite hard sometimes to accept that we're not special, that really what drives the success of an organization is the system. But that's the way it should be, really, because, again, if we step back and think a little bit more and think about that, as you say, second order, third order thinking, if it is us that's so special, we're not replaceable. The consequence of that, we can't go on holiday. We can't be sick. We can't be promoted. So actually, we want the systems to work so that we are replaceable, so that we can go off and work on something more interesting. We can go on holiday. We can be sick without the system falling down. Worst case, the old bus test. We can survive the bus test in the organization. And a better point of view from the management things, we can promote people. We can take good people and say, right, you've done great work on this system, but you've been working on it for years, so do you want to go and do something interesting and learn a different area of the system, learn something new? And you can go and do that because the system will survive without you. So I think we get a lot of pushback, but if we really think about it, that's the way we want our organizations. We want it to be the system. So as people, we can move around, we can do different interesting things, we can be promoted, we can take time off without it all crashing down around us.
I don't disagree. I think both people are special and performance is driven by the interactions of the system. So I think both of those things are true at the same time, in that knowledge work, as opposed to manual labor, recognizes that what we have in our mind is what differentiates what we do and how we do it. And so we can no longer replace people. If we wanted to, I don't agree with that mentality. We can't just replace people like in the Ford Motor days, right? Where there was a lot of dynamics there, but they didn't have unions. The organizations were owned by individuals, not corporations. So they were basically gods. They could do whatever they want, and they could replace it. And if you were replaced, you wouldn't be able to get a job later. So everyone was a manual worker with no knowledge. There wasn't technology. There was nothing special to be known. So very easily replaced. Whereas now we are knowledge workers, we are special, we are unique, thankfully, given progress. And so I think we are all special. There's some interesting things around that, though, around education. I think that's true, but I also think that still, it's the organization, still the system and how it's designed or not designed is what still drives performance. Whilst you have knowledge workers, you still need to create a system that allows them to cooperate. Because it's still, if what came out at the end of an organization depended on just one person, you wouldn't have an organization. Whereas because it doesn't, it's a product of everything that comes before it. You need that system. You need a way of bringing everyone, all these special people, all these knowledge of these individuals to come together and create a final product. So I think people are special. I think organizations are a product of their interactions. So I think both are true at the same time. What do you think?
Well, I think I need to be careful with my words here, because yes, we're all unique individuals and special, and we all have our own values. But equally as much, very few of us are as special as we might like to think. If you're one in a million, there are billions of people in the world. There are a lot of people that have similar capabilities and similar attributes. And not everyone will have had your same life experience. But I think we want to avoid that thinking that we're so special that we're irreplaceable. Because if we become irreplaceable, then, as you say, we haven't got an organization because we depend on that one person. But also, if we're irreplaceable, we can't be promoted. We can't be given a chance to work on a different project or on a different area. And actually, I would rather be replaceable so I can go and work on something different and something interesting than be stuck in an organization for 10 years doing the same thing over and over again because I'm irreplaceable.
Yeah,
I guess from that point of view, I'm arguing in favor of every individual should be looking to make themselves redundant by taking whatever it is that makes them unique and trying to put that into the system, trying to put that into the processes so that other people can fill them and they can move up the value chain and do something else with what they've learned and what they've progressed. And I think as managers, we should be trying to enable that from the other side of viewers. How do we get that out of the person into the systems and processes so they can move up and now work on the next thing that's even higher value?
No, forgive me. I completely didn't respond to your third point there around the need for people to move around and that freedom. I don't disagree with that, but I do feel that people are different, and therefore, but unfortunately, we try to standardize roles. We try to standardize organizations and kind of slots and things, and that is a little bit dangerous. So, whilst I agree the need is for people to have freedom to move around as they would like, I also recognize that the solution to that is not necessarily trying to standardize further, but maybe be more creative and understand if this person's looking to move, what makes this guy special or this lady special? And
So
if they are moving, what do we do?
I think there you're hitting on the problem we talked about originally, in that when you become a manager, we're back to square one. You have no idea how to do it. And the easy way of doing that is to try and make everything a round hole and then make everybody a round peg to fit in a round hole.
Yeah.
Because that's what you've seen other people do. You don't know whether it's good or bad. You don't have that mental model of this is what good looks like. You just have, this is what I've seen other people do. So again, it's that path of least resistance in a way, is to copy what you've seen already happen. And then if everybody's the same and I can just swap developer A for developer B, it makes your life so much easier when you don't have that mental model to know how long it is. You don't have the experience to go, this goes long, that's not going to work. And you don't get that immediate feedback. You know, when we're working as a software engineer, going back to my model of C, type in my C, I hit compile, and the compiler goes, no, John, you are wrong. Or the code runs and crashes, and I get that immediate feedback where we don't have that game in management. You go, I'm going to move these two people around and I'm going to get, Bob to go over here and Jill's going to do this and it'll be fine because they're replaceable. The impact of that decision is weeks, months, or even years away. And you don't then have that immediate feedback that ties it. If I type in some uncompilable C code, seconds later I hit compile, I get that immediate feedback. It's months later with management potentially, and very, very hard then for us, as again, we're valuable and have not great memories for the most part, very hard to remember that this decision we made 6 months ago caused this problem. Unless we've learned to do really good root cause analysis and we can have all the facts and we can go back and trace it, which again doesn't happen. So it's again that problem. We don't train new managers. We don't give them the support. We don't give them that leg up to know what good looks like. And in a lot of cases, a lot of people, a lot of senior managers even then don't know what good looks like. They're still copying the patterns they've seen, following in the footsteps, and maybe not being critical enough and thinking about it. So one interesting aspect I've seen on that notice is I very often see people moaning about management. We don't want the military style command and control management. Now, I never served in the military, so I won't say what it's really like, but I do know the military has been looking at, since almost World War I, when I went back and traced it, this idea of commander's intent. And that the person at the coalface makes a decision, and that the job of senior manager is to set the goals and set the objectives, define the constraints, and then push the decision-making down to the soldier at the front line. And the military have been talking about this for getting on for 100 years.
Yeah.
And we still say that the military is all about command and control. And again, I don't know what the reality is. I never served in the military, hope never to do so. But I know that they've been doing the research. They've looked at that. It's been in a lot of their papers. It's been studied in management schools for several dozen decades since. So for us to keep saying, well, we're command and control, we don't have these leadership models. We do, because they exist there. They've been documented for getting on for 100 years. And come back to what you said about situational leadership. We've recognized that leadership isn't a one-size-fits-all. It's very situational, and that depends on the people. It also depends on the context. So to take an example there, we, as software engineers, hate the idea of bureaucracy a lot of times. But there are places where very bureaucratic style leadership is correct. The example I like to use is, say you're running the passport office. Okay, and obviously I'm thinking about holidays here, so this is why it's on my mind. Think about the passport office. I don't want a bunch of knowledge workers being creative, sat on border control looking at people's passports. We want people following the bureaucratic process and doing it the same every single time. Looking at the photo. Is this the person? Is this passport valid? Is it in date? Do they have the right visa? There's a very different requirement and a very different set of processes you want them to follow versus if we're doing something that's, say, creative or knowledge work. So the leadership depends on not just the people, but the context that we're doing it in and what problem we're dealing with.
Ooh, John, I'm going to get frustrated because you say so much good stuff in such a short period of time. My memory's terrible. So I'm going to try my best to respond to it because that was very good. Oh, geez. Okay, the first thing that comes up for me was, let's start at the end because that's where my knowledge is freshest, right? So my memory is freshest. So bureaucracy is where the means, you focus on the means instead of the end, right? Where you're more focused on how we get somewhere as opposed to where we get. So I feel bureaucracy in its essence isn't a good thing. But I don't disagree that if you're looking for, I'm not sure what the word is, making sure that reliability maybe of the system.
Repeated processes. You want the same process done over and over again. So not bureaucracy per se is good, but bureaucratic leadership. We want to follow the same process over and over and over again to go for it because the process is what matters. We don't want people being creative.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but I think bureaucracy is where the means gets in the way of the end. You focus more on your goal becomes the means, not the end. So I feel that what you're saying very eloquently there is that we care about reducing variation in the process, and I feel bureaucracy is one way of achieving that, but not necessarily the right way, because bureaucracy almost creates like a process debt, I feel. But I don't disagree that. But I feel this kind of maybe goes back to, as you said, managers not being given the training or understanding they deserve as they step into a management position, and parents the same too, I have to say. That when Stephen Covey says, start with the end in mind. If you work backwards and say, what is our goal here? And if it's a passport office, for example, we want to minimize errors. We want to maximize kind of correctness. I'm sure there's a way of putting this better. If you build that into your goal and the conditions necessary to achieve your goal, then you can design for it. You can design the conditions necessary for that to occur. You could do that through technology. You could do that through process. You could do that otherwise. The way you probably don't want to do it because it starts to get in the way of bureaucracy. But and you've seen this better than me within technology, right? The best approach to kind of creating quality and bringing quality into software is not inspection at the end, which I deem as a way of bureaucratic approach, but to kind of, for example, at the very beginning, have pre-approved images that are secure, et cetera, et cetera. So you build the quality in at the beginning or in the process as opposed to inspecting at the end. And that reduces bureaucracy and introduces speed. So I agree with your approach that given the organization, they have a different goal and different necessary conditions to achieve that goal. And what some of them are, like in patient care and passports, are reduction of mistakes, or probably that's a bad way of putting it, increasing the reliability of results. And there was something else you said before that. Forgive me, there were so many good things, John. Can you perhaps remind me? I was trying not to type and take notes because it's going to be clunky noises.
Sure. So just to draw the differentiation. So bureaucracy is one thing that you described. Bureaucratic leadership is really focused about getting people to follow a well-defined process. It's not necessarily saying you have to have a lot of bureaucracy. It's a process-driven leadership style. We should come back to different leadership styles as well. I have a great post on one of my newsletters about it, and I would like to pick up a few others and talk about those. Before that, I talked about how we quite often criticize bad management as being command and control, like the military.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Whereas, partly through doing my MBA, partly because I like leading things and I dig into it. I've looked at a lot of leadership material, and I found right the way back to Germany in the 1920s, militaries were looking at this, what's now termed commander's intent, of how do we say, like, the general at the back is going to say, like, our objective is to capture that city. That's going to get filtered down, and they're going to set some objectives. They're going to set some constraints, like, you can't use the entire military. You can use these divisions or whatever. You mustn't destroy that road or that. So whatever constraints they've got, that's going to be filtered down, and then it's going to be the soldiers at the front line that make the final decision about how they carry out their part of the mission, which is completely different to command and control, because you're not saying you will do this, you will do that. You are passing down to, this is the goal, this is the objective, this is the constraints you have to work with. You figure out, as people at the coalface, how to execute.
So that reminds me really nicely of, I remember intent-based leadership. I think maybe Jez Humble mentioned it in Lean Enterprise. I can't remember, but that makes sense. It feels like there's a difference. And I think Acuff says something like management is about managing interactions as opposed to managing actions. So it's not about dictating the actions of staff. It's about improving the interactions in the organization so the staff can be successful. But unfortunately, when I was a manager, I thought it was about managing actions, saying, you shall do this, as opposed to saying, these are the outcomes I'd like you to, these are the outcomes I think we should reach. And of course, I believe in a Sociocratic approach, to kind of finding that. But it's then allowing them to use their creativity to get there. There's no point, if your family grows or your team grows at work, if you're command and control, you're just burnt out. You're wasting their creativity. Projects will fail. It's a lose-lose situation. So I don't disagree with that. The tool that I really quite like, and I'm sure there's plenty, but the one I quite like is in the theory of constraints. There's something called the goal tree. And the theory of constraints, because the name doesn't do it justice, is just a way of bringing a scientific method into social problems like organizations. So it's just a scientific method. And so the first question that you ask when you're approaching the scientific method is trying to understand what is the goal of the system? What are we trying to achieve? Because your system's designed to do what it does. And so if you're not getting the results you're getting, there's obviously something missing. So by starting with understanding what is the desired goal for your system, and what are the necessary conditions that need to exist for us to have more of that one goal. And the reason it's goal singular is, like you know better than me, when you're trying to refactor code, you can either have it faster or you can have it more readable. And you have to pick one. You can try and go for both, but you're going to be probably get nowhere. You'll probably be darting between the two and running in two different directions at the same time. So you pick one goal and you work out, what am I optimizing for? In many commercial organizations, it may be improve profits now and in the future. And now in the future being the key words there, because you can improve profits just by firing everyone, right? In the future, you want to improve your capability to do it in the future as well. So you choose your goal, your single goal, and then you work out what are the necessary conditions to do that. So for example, to improve profits now in the future, as Ellie Goldratt reminds us, you need to provide a secure and satisfying workplace, because otherwise your staff will leave and you won't be able to improve profits in the future. So you work backwards, and if you work backwards enough, then you can work out what are the conditions, or as you put, the objectives that I need staff to help me with. And that means that you've created a way of helping all of the organization work out what they're trying to achieve, the strategy, the why, and then they can fill in the gaps. They can work out the how. How do we get there? And so it allows staff to make sure that they're collaborating together or cooperating together towards the goal, know why they exist, why they're there, what their purpose is, and have that creativity to think, well, how can I do this rollout in Europe of this software so that we increase the number of customers that we have, and therefore increase profits now in the future because there's no other player in Europe. And so they can understand why they're here, what they're doing, and they can kind of innovate. And as you see, you get your enabling constraints as well, because it means by knowing what you focus on, you know what you're not focusing on. But yeah, I think that connects quite nicely with what you said. I agree with your intent-based leadership.
Yeah, and the flip side of that people need to remember as well, is if you're going to push that decision-making down to people, you've also got to push down to them permission to get it wrong.
Yeah.
You've got to allow the fact that if you're delegating that responsibility to them, and you want them to take that responsibility, and you want them to make choices, they've got to feel that safe to make choices. We need that psychological safety so that they can say, I think this is the best thing to do with everything I know. And then know if it goes wrong, you're not going to hold their feet to the fire and blame for it. I just wanted to hit a bit more on situational leadership, because I think one of the things that we quite often forget with a lot of this is that it's not just about the people, it's about the context. So I gave the example of the passport office and immigration, and we might want a lot of processes. Again, for, like say, banking, financial transactions, we might want to think carefully of that process to follow rules and regulations laid down by law. The other side of that, and that I like to emphasize, is sometimes, again, as a software engineer, I quite like the idea of democratic leadership and us all having a say. But that does mean that decisions take a bit longer. There are some contexts when that doesn't work. So again, democratic leadership is a nice idea. I'm fully in support of it. I'd like to work in that environment. But if my house starts burning down and the fire brigade turn up outside, I don't want them pulling up, getting out of the fire engine and then saying, well, what do we think we should do? And taking a vote on it, have a nice discussion. We want more of that command and control in a way of very quickly making a decision. And maybe it's a non-optimal decision, but you want that fast action. So again, context of the problem you're solving in a situation may require a different leadership approach.
That's interesting. So I'm taking notes now, similar to you. So
I have another example to talk about on that, but let's hear your thoughts on that one while we're here.
Yeah, sure. There's a few things you said there. So around safety, right? I completely agree. You want less to go unsaid. If people aren't speaking up, you don't have telemetry. You can't make decisions effectively based on all the information because you don't know what the information is. So I completely agree with that. But also the other thing that you raise, or you touch upon, which I quite like, is mistakes, right? People don't learn from getting things right. People only learn from getting things wrong. And that's ACOV. And so I guess what you want to do is you want to make sure that you make mistakes as safe as possible. I guess you want more, I can't remember the way around that Jeff Bezos does it, type 1, type 2 decisions.
Yeah.
You want more revolving door decisions where if you get it wrong, you can fix it. And less decisions where you can't come back. It's a one-way door. So working out how you can do that, plus learn the most you can, because you will make mistakes, and that's how you learn as an organization, as a human being, is really, really important. The other side to it is, I don't disagree that. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to optimize for. Are you trying to optimize going fast now or going fast in the future? When it comes to type of decision making, autocratic decision making, I realize in times of problems like the COVID outbreak, for example, I can realize having some kind of autocratic approach can be fast.
So autocratic is what I'd argue I want the fire brigade to do if they turn up here. I just want the lead person on the fire engine to get out and say, you get the hose out, you do this, and just to get on with it and start putting the fire out and rescue my family. Don't want the democratic version there where we have a quick chin wag over it and discuss it for half an hour.
And I guess it depends on the type of problem. And this is where, again, borders my knowledge, Cynefin and things like that. I realize depending on the situation type, like something like that, where it's just put the fire out, it's, yeah, fine. But in an organization, I don't necessarily see that, right? The old adage, go alone, go fast, go together, go far. Right? So I feel that often with autocratic, particularly when there's a distance between management and the staff, where managers can't see everything the staff see and staff can't see anything management can see, the last thing you want necessarily is management making a decision within reason, right? There's certain times, maybe again during COVID, where you just need action, regardless of, at the right one or the wrong one, you need action. But I'd say most of the time, what you need is a way of reaching the right action and fair process, which is where if you include people in the decision-making process, even if you don't take on their feedback, by the fact that they're involved, they'll accept the decision and go with it. But I think there's another approach, which...
I want to challenge that there, because again, let's take the organization then.
Yeah,
let's drop my fire brigade analogy. I think situational leadership is very context dependent. Let's take a software company, for example. Day-to-day operations. Let's put me in a situation. I would like to be a very democratic servant leadership of my team in our day-to-day operations and how we're building this software. I want to be removing roadblocks, bottlenecks for my team, making sure they've got resources. Let's then say we have an outage and it's the middle of the night. I don't want a democratic approach to resolving that. I want the very autocratic, somebody who's best positioned, whether that's me or the tech lead or somebody else on the team, to take charge and fix that issue as quickly as possible. And you said to do the right thing. I don't necessarily want them to do the best thing there, so slight difference in best or right, but do want them to fix it. It might not be the best fix, but we do want... So again, I think that leadership style can change in that situation, and that, 4:30 in the afternoon, we're busy doing our normal work, very happy with servant leadership, democratic approach. 8 o'clock at night, something goes down, we need to get it back online to meet our SLA. Very happy for the leadership to pivot to autocratic for the next 2 hours while we get it back online, and then come back to servant leadership the next day and put the long-term fix in. So again, I think something we forget is we don't have to have one leadership style, and that situational leadership can change by the minute or by the hour for the context that we're working within.
Well, that's interesting. For me, I guess the point of view is, I guess, what's different. And like, is it the point of view of autocratic from managers, which is my assumption, which is in that kind of case, I agree that you want the person who understands the most of the situation to solve it. And therefore, for me, if I was a leader in that situation, I wouldn't want to do anything to solve the problem, to stem the bleeding. I want the guy who knows the most hands-on to solve it. The other approach that I think is often missed, which is the sociocratic approach, right? Democratic, I agree with everyone having a voice. I agree with everyone contributing to decisions and making it better, but the mechanism feels difficult with democratic. What I like about sociocratic is you look for objections. It's the difference with democratic and sociocratic, as I understand it, is democratic is does everyone agree? If anyone doesn't agree, you're stalled. Whereas sociocratic is, does anyone object? And that means that, or is this good enough for now, is maybe a better way of putting it. And objections, when you read an objection, it's, I object because there's something important here that's been missed. It's a flag that you need to kind of debug deeper because there's an assumption that's missing that can help make your approach stronger. And I feel that's particularly important in the situation, the context, as you frame it, when there's a difference between where the manager is and where the staff is. They can't see the terrain together, and you need to bring them together to make that effective decision. By someone saying, actually, I object, it's not like, well, stop objecting. It's, oh, well, can you help me understand why you're objecting? Because there's obviously something that you're seeing that needs to be brought forward. But you're just looking for good enough. Is this good enough to move forward? And that's why democratic can seem to slow things down, but the sociocratic approach of just no objections, good enough for now, this feels like a pragmatic way of making sure that you're not missing some important facts, and you can move forward as a team more quickly. But yeah, what you say about kind of an outage and giving the engineer authority, if they don't already have it, they should also hopefully have authority to sort these things out themselves in the moment. If it makes sense.
Yeah. So just what you're talking about there made me think about disagree and commit. Something that is so often misunderstood. So often misunderstood as, okay, you disagree, but shut up and commit to what I'm saying, which is not the point. It's absolutely not what it was meant to be. But I think it does need, I think that disagree and commit is a good idea because sometimes we just have to make a decision. Back to that type 1, type 2, sometimes we don't have to make the perfect decision, but we need to make a decision and move forward. And it's better to make that progress. And if it's wrong, we learn, we come back, make the decision again, move forward. Where pausing and being paralyzed with analysis will be worse. And I think that's where disagree and commit is so valuable. And we say, okay, we can't agree what the right solution is. Enough of us think that this is a possible good solution. So we will agree that we disagree, commit, go forward. We'll learn that it was the right decision or it was the wrong one. Yeah, and then without blame, we'll come back and go, okay, we committed to it, we tried it, we gave it our best shot. We've now learned this, and we'll have a do-over or whatever. How do you think we get to that level of maturity for managers and a team where we can do that constructively without it being blame?
Oh, I love that. Sorry, I was getting excited there, John. I think the way Acuff puts it is he suggests, I believe, that recording the assumptions behind a decision is the important thing, right? So that when we come back, we can pinpoint the learning. If we just say, yeah, we're going to make this decision, if we get it wrong, we'll come back to it. By the time we come back to it, we've forgotten why we made the decision in that way in the first place. As you said, it often takes years before we know whether we made the right decision, particularly in the management land. You put it so well that it's like a bruise. It's the difference between a bruise and a cut. If I cut myself, I know straight away, oh, geez, I did this, my cat got me. Whereas if I bruise myself, it's the next day and I'm like, oh, geez, how did that happen? I can't place the cause that led to that effect. And that's just, and also an organization is more complicated because you have many different areas and you might get bruised by something like miles away and you'll never see it. It might be completely different part of the organization. So, sorry, your point there is very, very important. That if we want to maximize our learnings, we don't just disagree and commit. I'm grateful you explained that to me. I didn't appreciate it. But it's also a decision log, assumption log, disagree and commit. So that when we come back, we can pinpoint which assumption was wrong. Otherwise, there's no learning there. And this is why I love and to your point of, how can we do that? I love the theory of constraints tools because they have these things called the thinking processes. And the thinking process is a way of methodically working through how to make a decision in a way that works for everyone and it increases your chances of success. So the first thing is the goal tree. It's like, what are we trying to optimize for here? If we don't know what we're trying to optimize for, we can't be productive. We can't make any progress because we don't know what direction we're trying to go. Once you all agree on the goal, then you move to the next thing, which is the current reality tree, which is what is the problem that we're trying to solve and what's causing it. Because if you don't agree on the problem, you can't move to the solution. If you're all trying to solve different problems and optimize for different outcomes, you're never going to get to agree to the problem. So you agree the goal, agree the problem, agree the solution, and then agree implementation. If you try and do those out of order, you'll just end up with different mental models. You're talking about different things. The tools also interweave a little bit. By agreeing the goal and agreeing what you need to achieve more of the goal, you can also find what are the few things that you don't have that you need, and that can then inform the rest of the process. And so you get this kind of nice filtering. But by doing this, you kind of build these. The great thing about these tools is they're visual. And so when you've done your working out, saying, I think this is the goal, and as you in doing that, you put your assumptions down, you write them down. And it sounds really arduous, but it's really simple. And then in the current reality tree, you work out, well, I think all the problems, all these symptoms are coming from this underlying cause, and we just focus on that. But in doing so, you've laid out your assumptions visually. And the great thing about that is then you can put it in front of someone and say, tell me where I'm wrong, because I can't see everything in an organization. It's not a one-man organization. And so you can put that in front of other people. And in doing so, not only do you make sure you're focusing on the right thing, but you also make sure that you build in other people's understanding and get agreement. So it's very, very easy and very surprisingly quick to generate consent on where you want to get to and how you're going to get there, even with very large teams. And you increase your chance of success. The future reality tree is where it comes to kind of solution implementation. The great thing about that is it's almost like simulating a solution. What you do is it's always like test-driven development. So, okay, we agreed the goal, we've agreed the problem. The future reality tree is then about saying what is the minimum amount of change or the minimum amount of code that we need to inject into the given situation to negate the symptoms, turn them from red to green like unit tests, and make sure that we don't miss anything important and that we predict any negative branches, any unexpected side effects. And that's a great way. We do that in TDD. Why don't we do that in debugging organizations, right? And kind of testing what we were about to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, going back to what you mentioned with Jeff Bezos before, I think that's one thing that the idea of having this written culture where you have to do that thinking and write things down before, then present them to people for your challenge is incredibly useful. If you combine it with what you've just described, in particular, it'd be very useful. And I think the reason we don't do that, again, is back to we like to solve problems. We're naturally problem solvers drawn to software engineering. And too often we rush to solving the problem because that seems to be the bit. And that, again, partly is what we measure, isn't it? Is we measure, did you solve the problem by producing code? So we incentivize people to not do the thinking because we don't reward people for writing a document and writing an RFC or a decision log or whatever mechanism you use. We reward people for, hey, we've got some code that's been deployed in production and is doing something. So we kind of draw people jumping straight to the solution and skipping that thinking in advance, which is a shame because that, again, it's like more haste, less speed, really. If we skip that thinking, we skip that understanding the problem and really getting to grips with it before we try and solve it, we quite often do the wrong thing.
No, that makes sense. So I was writing down a note there to myself to remember that my father made me read this book about sales, written by, I think it's Neil Rackham. I think it's called Spin Sales now. And what he talks about he was very interesting in how he thought, how he thinks. He was talking about a lot of the time, a lot of the focus on sales training programs is on how to better close the deal. And he says that closing the deal, you don't get better at closing the deal. You get better at all the steps before that, so that when you're getting close to close the deal, it's easy. And so, as you said, by focusing on the bit that looks direct, the bit at the surface level, you forget to all the bit that's necessary before that, like in organized R&D, marketing. Those are the hidden bits. They offer indirect benefits, but they sow the seeds for the things that come next, the sales, the product development. But because you can't measure, yeah, John.
So to give that an example, it's that old, can't think of the right word, the description of trying to sell ice to Eskimos. It doesn't matter how good a closer you are. Eskimos don't want to buy ice. Go to a guy who's thirsty in the Sahara, they'll buy your hand off for ice. So the spin selling is all about, it's all as you say, the steps before of sell the right thing to the right person, understand what problem they're trying to solve and give them a solution. Don't go and try and sell an Eskimo ice because they're surrounded by it. They have no need for it.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Closing won't improve that. It's talk to the right people.
Exactly. Yeah, really well put. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what is the problem they're facing? And, as UX design, my summary of UX design is who the F are you and what's your problem, right? Do that with Eskimos, better understand it and find the right problem to solve for them, something that matters to them.
Yeah, absolutely. The final one I wanted to come back to on situational leadership is that context thing. So I like to point out to people that if you want to be a good manager and a leader, this situational leadership really applies to you, because there's been a time in my past I have worked with the same team 3 times. When I say the team had the same name, they were working on the same project. It wasn't the same team. During that time, the person managing the team changed. The composition of the team changed. For all 3 times, the organization tried to get the leader to be the same. And that doesn't work, to my mind. It's back to the situational leadership, because if you have a team of highly experienced senior software engineers, say, that are all domain experts, subject matter experts, whatever, you can be very democratic. You can let them use their expertise. Take the opposite end. If you have the team of, let's say, that both teams are 8 people, but you've got 8 people who are in their first week of their professional career, they don't have the experience necessary to make the same decisions this team of 8 senior people with an average of 20 years experience will make. They have a very different context. They have less domain in. They're going to need to be managed in a very different way. You can't say, should we use Kubernetes or should we use serverless, and ask a team of people who are in the first week of their careers to make that decision democratically in the way you could perhaps senior engineers who have spent 20 years building whatever you are. They have very different contexts. So again, your context of how you lead needs to change with, what's the situation you're in? What's the team makeup you've got? Who are you? Where are things at? And it's so important that I think as a leader and a manager, you can be aware of these different leadership styles and how you use them. And maybe, again, it changes per person. Maybe you have to be the right kind of leader for you, Simon, and a different kind of leader for me in a different situation.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think the situation you depict, it feels like, I agree that maybe managers may not fit certain situations, but I feel most managers will fit most situations if they're able to discern the situation they're in, perhaps. But in the one that you suggest, right, the question is, how can we help these guys make as many mistakes as possible without having any impact on the organization?
Or them. Because we don't want them to feel bad about it either.
No, absolutely, exactly. Right. And so, the question is, again, what's the goal of the team? If the goal is the team to deliver high quality software faster, the question becomes, hey, well, I've got 8 people here that are early in their careers. How can I help them learn the fastest? And the question, the situation then would be, how do I help them just let them make the decisions, but not feel any impact of the decisions, and not let the organization feel the impact of the decisions? And that's a very interesting thing to design for. But again, you're designing the system for the system, if that makes sense. You're designing the system for the code system, the technical system. Go ahead, sorry, John.
And circling right the way back to one of the first things you said, we don't give managers this awareness of the different situational leadership and the different styles that they can bring to it. They've generally seen maybe 1 or 2 leadership styles, and they've had that model from their own experience. So on top of all this, in creating that situation for that team of juniors to learn, we need to create the situation for the manager to learn and be able to evolve and to experience this and see different models of leadership, see how they work, and gain enough experience to know that there are different situations they can be in, there are different contexts they can be managing in, and there are different leadership styles they can apply to these. And to be aware that it's okay for them to change, and that some leadership styles won't suit them, some leadership styles will suit them.
Well, I don't disagree. I think, just to maybe try to add to what you say, I think when I use the term situational awareness and my limited understanding of it, it's more how to adapt to individuals based on their kind of profile, their how they like to interact. And so that is something I'm still learning. The other side of it is how to adapt to the situation around them I feel that's just scientific method. It's about understanding the situation, designing for the results that you want to get. And I feel that's something that any manager can learn and just understand. So sorry, there's something else you said there, which is similar to parenting, right? My child is changing, and understanding his needs and how to adapt to them as he grows is hard. But I still feel there's something else that you said there. Sorry, John. As a 10-month-old dad, my brain is really fizzling.
You're nicely illustrating the point that everybody's context is different. My kids are a bit older than that. I don't have that 10-month-old.
That was it. Thank you. Sorry, the situation you said. Yeah. So I think the key word is why. What another thing Goldratt said is, he said, as we get older, what kids are really good at asking is the question why. So you'll say, they might say, why is the sky blue? And then you'll give them an answer. They'll say, yeah, but why? And they'll keep asking why. At some point, you'll say, as Eddie Goldratt said, go talk to you. I'll go ask your mother. Right? You'll just try and get rid of them. And as we get older, we forget to ask why. So yes, different approaches work in different circumstances, but the question is why. So, for example, I need to understand why helping my team make as many mistakes as possible in a short space of time is right for that situation and not right for another situation. That means not just knowing 100 different approaches, but me, through first principles, working out what is the situation that I'm in, what is the goal, what is the constraint to achieving that goal, and how do I create the conditions for that situation. So it's not about having a recipe book. It's quite the opposite. It's about understanding, how do I learn how to cook, if that makes sense.
Which is why it's so important that we have that management training and that support, that kind of mentoring and coaching for new managers, which is so often missing, because yes, we have to learn from mistakes, but sometimes we don't want to make mistakes as a new manager. We want to learn from other people's mistakes, because
yes,
if we learn from our own mistakes, people get hurt. As a manager, we can have an impact. We might fire somebody for something that was our fault. We might not promote someone. We might demote someone. We might push somebody out of an organization through things that we get wrong. So again, we want to make a lot of those, or we want to learn from other people's mistakes, so we avoid hurting people and causing harm along the way.
Well, I don't disagree. I think my father told me, a wise man learns from other people's mistakes. Interchange that with women as well, please. But I feel we need to make mistakes. We need to make mistakes to learn. And so the question becomes, how can we make mistakes in a way that doesn't harm others? And that's what we should be designing for, because that's what we need. So if you're at risk of making a decision that could impact someone else's career, there's something wrong in the organization. There's something wrong in how you're approaching things. And that's the condition that we need to adjust, right? And that could be like, we have a new manager mentoring program. We have a new manager way of thinking things through for them to understand, is this fundamental attribution error where the manager's only seeing half the story and assuming that to be true before understanding the other half of the story. There's kind of techniques that could help reduce the type 2 errors into type 1 errors. And that's necessary. You need to make mistakes. It's just, you need to maximize learning as you kind of help me see, and you need to minimize the impact as you help me see.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed talking, Simon, but I've realized we've gone well over an hour.
I'm grateful for the extra time.
It's been a pleasure talking about it. Any final things that you'd like to share with the viewers and listeners?
I think what we talked about is, like in no particular order, is managers need to understand the situation they're in. What are they optimizing for? What are the problems? Where are they coming from? How do we treat them at the root so that we can maximize our progress towards our goal? You've helped me see the importance of mistakes and how they are a natural thing that we need to encourage, or at least understand, but minimize the impact and maximize the learning. And you've helped me understand the need for situational leadership, that we need to be able to ask why things are occurring, where are they coming from, that we have to be soft on people and hard on systems, recognize that most things come from the organization, like a pachinko machine. You used another term, which I really quite liked, like a flowing of water. And also you reminded me of, what was the word used? Intent-based leadership. I really quite like that. And it resonates a great deal, that we need to give people direction, but allow them to choose the means of getting there, trusting their creativity and provide them the safety and the conditions needed for them to succeed. Would you say there was anything else there, John?
No, I think that was a great summary. Do you want to come back and summarize every other episode for me?
Oh, no, that's where I would use AI.
That would be a great use of it. It's a shame that we don't spend more time talking about Atri. We use an AI tool to edit these podcasts and generate the transcript. There's so many great things that AI does that get lost in all the hyperland LLMs at the moment. But that's a topic for another day. So thank you very much for your time, Simon. It's been a pleasure talking to you.